What is up, Rad Potential YouTube? We're back with another Radformational segment in the Rad Ranch Garage. So, what are we talking about today? We are going to talk about everything you need to know or need to get, or everything you need to know and need to get to put a 13B in your first generation RX7. So, you might say, well, some of them came with 13Bs. Yes, you are correct. 1984 and 1985, they had a gslse model that came with a fuel-injected 13B engine from the factory. Great car, great motor. Also a great candidate for swapping into your currently 12A powered car. So, if you want to learn the difference between a 12A and a 13B, I have another video on my channel. Look that one up. It's very informative, goes through a lot more detailed stuff about the engine. However, this video we're going to focus on just putting it in this car. So this is my 1980 RX7. I call it the Mouse. And it is currently powered by a nice ported 12A. We got a Holley carburetor on there, etc. And I'm going to use it to kind of show you some stuff. So, the things you're going to need to get. I'll show you the list right now. So that way you don't have to tune in for the whole video, but I'm going to talk through every bit. So right here, you need a 13B engine. You need a gslse oil pan. You need a gslse front mount. You need an oil cooler if your car has a beehive. 13B header and 13B intake setup. So we're going to run through this stuff. The engines to get. My personal recommendation, find a 13B older than 1991. It's going to make your life a whole lot easier. Everything's just similar to how the old school stuff works on those motors. So FC engines, a gslse engine, find you like an old school truck, 4-port motor out of a truck or a Cosmo or a RX3. Those are all going to be fantastic engines, or have somebody build you a hybrid motor 13B. So first, find you an engine. Second thing, you need an NA diameter flywheel. So I've never played with an automatic car, never owned one, never plan to, but I would assume it's the same. You need to get the small diameter flywheel so that way it'll fit in your transmission. Okay, so there's the turbo flywheels and a RX8 flywheel, which are bigger. All the rotaries share the same bolt pattern, so it will bolt up, but those turbo and RX8 flywheels are bigger diameter. So you need to get the right one that matches the balance of your motor. So if you have an S4 FC engine, you need an S4 NA flywheel and clutch. That will go right into your trans, so the input shaft of the transmission is the same. So that's the first bit, get the engine. Second bit, with that engine, it could come with a different water pump, okay? Now, I would suggest, if your car has a 12A in it already, take the water pump off your 12A, take the alternator off your 12A, and put it on that 13B. Reason why. Your clutch fan will go right onto that water pump. There are variations in clutch fan mount. With that, I mean the diameter of this circle right here, where your clutch fan mounts, is different on some of them. So you'll see that one there. You'll see this one here is a circle, this one's not a circle, etc. So you'll have to make sure that you have the right bit for the fan, and I would just suggest taking your water pump off your 12A, take your alternator off your 12A, and put it back in your car. Makes life simpler. Second thing you'll need off your 12A is to take your distributor right here, take it clean out of your 12A, put it right back in the 13B. Okay? Now, if you get an FC engine, it's going to come with a front cover that doesn't have a provision for an engine mount. So you'll need to get, and like I said, if you already have a 12A in your car, you have the right front cover. So take your 12A front cover off. It looks like this. It's going to have 4 bolts sticking out of it where you can put this front plate on. Put that front cover on your 13B. You need it. Now, the next thing is the front engine mount. A 13B engine mount is going to be more straight than bent back. So if you've watched my other video, a 12A is 20 centimeters shorter than a 13B. So if you look down here, you'll see the angle of that front engine mount. Let me grab a flashlight real quick if I've got one handy. But anyways, the angle of the front engine mount is greater in order to push the engine further backwards. I'm just going to set that here, it's easier to see from the other side. So, a 13B engine mount will fit the 13B. Now, there you go. See how the angle of this right here is steeper towards the motor, okay? So, what does that mean? Well, the engine mount itself, as far as the mounts on the K-member, are in the same exact spot, 13B to 12A. You just need the different front plate. You can take a 12A front plate and slot the holes. And so by that, I mean you can take these holes right here that mount the engine and slot them so that this will slide, your 12A one will slide forward, which will let you mount a 13B. Okay, moving down the list. You need a gslse oil pan. That is the only 13B oil pan that will fit in a first gen, unless you have a different subframe or make a custom one or whatever. So you could stretch a 12A one out. They're not the same. The engines are bigger. You can buy those oil pans brand new still, so I suggest picking one up, $100. Find a used one if you want to deal with bent oil pans and stuff. But you cannot use like an FC oil pan. You cannot use a truck oil pan. The sump's different. So you'll need that oil pan, and you will also need the gslse pickup tube. Okay, or you can make your own pickup tube if you know how to weld, but you need that. Next thing is an oil cooler. Okay, most likely 8485, I know for sure, and the earlier ones too, had a beehive oil cooler on your 12A. And what that is that's this big mess of stuff sitting right about here. It's got coolant running through it. Your oil filter sits up real high. It's a mess, okay? So with the 13B, you're not going to be able to put that on your 13B because there's not a coolant provision for on a 13B, the T that goes up to it. There's also that hard line that runs off there is not going to reach the front cover because it's longer. So, my suggestion, find an oil cooler from a first gen if you can. So, 79 and 80 had a front mount oil cooler, a gslse had a front mount oil cooler. Get the oil lines from that and get the oil cooler. It should mount underneath the radiator. If you have to make custom brackets because you couldn't find the little rubber dealy whoppers, do that. You can get an FC oil cooler, which is bigger, but it won't fit under the radiator. You'll have to mount it under the front mouth, so you can mount it up in here. There's a nice crossbar up there on a first gen, and you can just either like make some brackets off that or mount it to that. So you will need an oil cooler. You can make all of those lines out of AN stuff, just like Earl's Fittings dash 8 dash 10 fittings. They sell a fitting for here. You can get a fitting for here that'll fit to run stainless braided lines like these. So you'll need fittings like that, etc. Okay, you will also need a 13B header. Now, it is recommended to not run a 12A header on a 13B. First of all, it won't fit. The holes aren't in the right spot. You can waller them out and make your header fit, but the ports on a 13B are a lot bigger, and it's going to be a big restriction. So, find a 13B header. There's a company called Pace Setter. You can buy them on Summit Racing, 100 and something bucks. There was one up here. Not a bad header. It does not come with a flange. If you put the header on, take it to an exhaust shop. They should get you sorted out fairly cheap. I would also recommend a Racing Beat header or some other custom one, but those are a little expensive. The Pace Setter one does work. It is a little tinny. And I mean, if you're on a budget just trying to get your car back on the road and you had a good deal on a 13B, I would say just pick up the Pace Setter, weld it up, let it eat. So, the last thing, and I say the last thing, but there'll probably be more that I'll think of here in a second, is an intake and carburetor setup. So, if your car had a 12A and it had a carburetor, I doubt anybody who has a 12A turbo would be putting a 13B in there. So, your car had a Nicky, which would look like this, right up here. Okay, or your car had, some aftermarket dealie, like the, a Holley manifold, or like this is a wraparound Weber manifold, or it could have had an IDA manifold like that has the carb vertical, or whatever. So you need to find a carb and an intake that fits the 13B. So Racing Beat, there's other companies that make intake manifolds for all sorts of 13B engines that'll fit a carburetor. So you can get one that fits a 6-port, you can get one that fits a 13B turbo, like a FC motor. You can get ones for the old school 4-port stuff. Fairly easy. Okay, you can just start searching on the web. You can buy them new still. I know they're fairly pricey, but you'll need to get a setup like that. And if you want to, use all the information I just gave you to mount the engine, and then put EFI or something on it. If you probably figure out the wiring on YouTube or something for it, or on the internet. But you're gonna need to get fuel and stuff to it. like I said earlier, you can use your 12A distributor. It'll just go right in. You keep all the same wiring. You know, no big deal. If you're using your alternator from the 12A, the wiring will be the same. Plug wires will be the same. Oil filter will be the same. You will need to change the temperature sensor from your 12A to the 13B, and most likely your 12A does not have an oil pressure sensor, so you will have to block off the oil pressure sensor hole on the 13B, which is right here. So if you have a later model car, 84, 85, it'll probably have that. So I'd take that back. You probably might have an oil pressure sensor. The early ones didn't. So with that, that's a lot of info to jam down in like 10 minutes, but I think that pretty much covers it. So like I said, I'll show you the list again. This is the main stuff you got to get here. And like I said, key thing, if you can find somebody with a running FC or a running car that doesn't want the engine, maybe doing an LS swap, just grab any of the older rotary engines. You know, a few $100 here and there, you can make it work in your car. They will mount, they all mount the same. I mean, as long as you got an engine in your car to use parts off of, and you're pretty much good. So the 13B is a wonderful upgrade for these cars. Bit more power, bit more torque. Yeah, it's a great upgrade. So, as usual, drop any questions you have below in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. And let's get your car on the road. Get you a 13B. Get you something put together. So, thanks for tuning in. Keep it rad.